Hi, this is Ensign Brungold. I'm a communication officer with Starbase 118. This communication was found trapped in a buffer loop for a significant amount of time, so here it is.
Music has been around for as long as mankind has existed. It allows us to create and express ourselves in a way that sometimes words alone just can't cut. It can be serious, pointing out societal shortcomings and calling people to action for change, but it can also be humorous, lightening our hearts and lifting our spirits. As our community members know, there is a variety of different styles. Among them, our listeners are probably quite familiar with folk music, generally considered rural or music handed down through the ages. And from this style sprang another variety of the same vein, that of Filk. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Filk music, this is a genre that is quite new compared to folk. It actually got its start sometime during the early 50s, and of course is still around today. It's generally similar to folk music, but with a science fiction, fantasy, or other fandom-type theme. And those who are familiar with this genre probably know the name I'm about to give. Leslie Fish, author and artist who is the creative mind behind the song Band from Argo, which was the inspiration for Starbase 118's parody, Band from Menthar, recorded back in 2016. Thank you for joining us today, Ms. Fish.
Glad to be here. Oh, Band from Argo. Boy, what a saga that is. I never did get to see Band from Menthar. I'd appreciate you telling me what the URL or the YouTube site is, so I can go look it up.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can certainly do that for you at the end of our call. But first things first, if you could, please tell us a little about yourself, where you were born, where you grew up, and how you got into music.
Well, I was born and raised in a desperately respectable, dull, boring suburb of desperately dull, respectable New Jersey. And my mother had been a professional musician before she met my father, and after I was old enough, she went back to work as a music teacher in the New Jersey school system. My father was a dentist. And
he was a dentist?
A dentist.
Oh. Okay.
His brother had an orifice, a clinic that was attached to the house. You got to about going through a door to the dining room. And I used to play there and read medical journals and anything else he kept out in the waiting room. And also, he decided that it was good for children to learn how to work. So when I was 15, I went to work in his clinic after school for about 3 hours a day, and for the magnificent sum of $1 an hour. Think about that. And I did learn a few things about dentistry, a lot more about the people who came in who were patients, especially the children. You ever try to talk a nervous 6-year-old into letting the dentist poke a needle into his mouth? That takes work. Anyway, but the neighborhood was so desperately dull, it was boring and respectable. I just couldn't wait to get away and lead an adventurous life. So as soon as I escaped to college, I tried doing just that. For one thing, I've been a fan of folk music since I first heard it, and thereby hangs a tale too. Oh, when I was little, my mom wanted me to learn dance, modern dance, to take it as easy as she thought. And so she took me to a modern dance course that was taught for small children at the local YWCA. It was taught by a woman named Marjorie Mazia. And for her teaching classes, she would sometimes have this little curly-haired, great silver-eyed man come and play guitar. So for it can be in the dance class. And he could play tunes and sing little children's songs that were so fetching. They just make you dance. I appreciated this because, I was the smallest kid in class, so of course I got picked on. And when he noticed I was being picked on, he would start playing one of his songs, and the other kids would get up and dance and leave me alone. I was very grateful to him. It wasn't until years later, when I was, going through all the books published by Sing Out, and I came across I came across a collection of songs by Woody Guthrie. I was fascinated. I also was taking up just simply studying folk music by itself. I learned a lot about Woody Guthrie. It wasn't until I got to the end of the book and looked up in the back page. It mentioned it. For further information and recording rights, to contact Marjorie Mazia and let your address. That's when I realized who that little curly-headed, silver-eyed man had been. Wow. I met him when I was just 6.
Oh, that's pretty
and,
cool.
Yeah. I then learned that he was still alive, just that he'd been stricken with Huntington's chorea and was confined to a hospital in New York. So I manfully made my way from suburban New Jersey all the way out to New York City and Queens County Hospital, just so I could thank him, tell him what his songs had meant to me and to other people I knew. And I brought my guitar along. And, well, the nurses guided me up to this floor and out to that wing, and there was a little skinny, gray-haired, curly-haired man lying to sleep on a sofa. And there's how, hey, Woody, you got a guest. He woke up, sat up, looked at me, and they were the same silver eyes. Yep, that was him.
Mm-hmm.
He was in bad shape. He could no longer speak coherently. He can only sort of nod for yes, grunt for no, and point roughly with his left hand at what he meant. Well, this was going to be a communication tough one. But I managed. First, I put up my guitar and told him, hey, I've learned a lot of your songs. Tell me what you think of them. And I sang my rendition of his Pastures of Plenty. And, of course, This Land Is Your Land, the classic.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him I particularly liked the Ballad of Tom Joad and how it summarized the grapes of wrath a lot better than a lot of critical reviews I'd seen.
Mm.
And then I sang a few of my songs that I'd written. He liked them. And he tried to communicate further, like, say, he could only point roughly to what he meant. And I could ask, is this what you mean, or is that what you mean? And he could either nod or grunt. We managed to communicate that way. And I swear, the effort of communicating with him like that, I do believe, stirred up my psychic talent, because there's no way I could have understood, otherwise I could understand half the things he meant. I kept on coming back every weekend until I was old enough to get away to college. And I would keep coming back during my college vacations, only to see him getting worse and weaker. Finally, when I was away at college, I read in the newspapers that Woody Guthrie was dead. I thought to myself, a lot. For one thing, I lost religion over that. I mean, of all the miserable ways for a musician, a singer, a poet, to die, and to be unable to communicate has got to be the worst. Mm. So, as I say, I've lost the religion I've been raised in, which I'd accept only because I was taught it. And I began looking through the various religions of the world. I went shopping in the marketplace of the gods, and with a critical eye. And I finally found a brand I liked. That was neo-paganism, the new pagans. I mean, I liked the ethics, I liked the aesthetics. And after I read Isaac Bonowitz's Real Magic, I could see how it applied. I liked the fact that this was a religion that you could apply scientific method to. And it was fascinating. So that's what I've hung with ever since. When I finally did get married, it was in the Unitarian church, the local Unitarians, because they'll take anybody's wedding. But it was taught by one of my old buddies, my old buddies in the pagan gang I ran with in Chicago when I was a kid. No, when I was, well, not a kid, I was in past college age. So Yeah, I've seen Peggy ever since. So has Rusty. He's got pentagrams tattooed on his forearms. I mean, you know what kind of guy that is. Anyhow, well, that brings me up to my college years, but as I say, I started with folk music at an early age. I was studying folk music when I ran into Woody again when I was 16. And when I went to college, I studied I took courses in ethnomusicology besides joining a local folk club and hanging out at the local folk guitar hangout, which was Herb David's guitar studio. I drew the logo for his business, which he still has to this day. And I sold my old guitar there and managed to buy bought a new one, and finally wound up with Monster, the rarity that I've got now. Monster was made from a K body, an indented K body, and I think a Martin neck, and a head that he extended by hand himself to accommodate the extra strings. I believe that Jeremy Kammerer, this guy who did it, I believe he made one other guitar like that in all the world. And that one he sold no less than Pete Seeger. So I've heard. But anyway, that's how I came to have Monster, my very peculiar 12-string. And I got started in folk music. I was also interested in science fiction from an early age. And from the time I was old enough to read, I started reading. My mother taught me to read, really. She started when I was 3 years old. At first, she gave me alphabet blocks and showed me the sounds of the letters in the alphabet blocks and how they could be put together. And, of course, she read to me every night at bedtime. So that I noticed early on that the same stories from the same books were always told the exact same words. And she pointed out, yes, and the words are right here. And I would look at them as she read them. So I picked up reading when I was about 3 years old. I remember the first book I could read by myself was a Bucky Bug comic book. And from what I'd been taught, I could figure out most of the words. Except one, the word mules. Had me stumped. What is that? Moles? So I finally went and asked Mom. And she explained about, here's how it works with a vowel that's followed by another vowel. It's pronounced mules. Oh, and what is this you're reading? Oh, a comic book. Oh, how disgusting. How low class. Sigh. And, of course, she took away the comic book and threw it out. My parents, as I say, were very much obsessed with class. But, nonetheless, that's what I first learned to read with. And after that, there was no holding me back. I read a lot of books that my parents didn't think were appropriate for a little lady. Oh, boy. But anyway, when I got... one thing I learned when I was reading comic books in an early age was I learned to recognize the artistic style of artists like Jack Davis and Wally Wood and... what's his name? Steve Ditko, the objectivist. I recognized artists by their style at an early age. And all that from comic books. And I was still living at home when in fact, I was pretty young. Well, I was less than 12 when the great comic book moral panic started up. Dr. Frederick Wortham insisting that comic books are corrupting youth. And my mom got caught up in that panic. And she used to go to concerned parents' meetings, dragging me along as an example of modern youth. My innocent little girl must not be corrupted by you. I hated that. I also hated the tight little pitchy formal dresses she would cram me into in order to take me to those damn meetings. I mean, do you remember stiff little pink dresses with a tight bodice and the skirts that flare out over crinolines and show your legs and the crotch down? Remember those?
Yeah, well, I've seen pictures, yeah.
And they don't let you breathe. God, I hated that. I also hated the color pink.
I'm with you there. I'm not particularly a fan of the color pink in most cases.
No, I'm convinced that the color pink is the color of oppression. It's the color of the obscene slavery of women, and I hate it. Really?
So you started reading with these comic books. Were these comic books did they influence you when you got into music? Were they sort of maybe a catalyst for getting into Filk as opposed to straight up folk?
Yes, because a lot of them were science fiction. That's how I got into reading science fiction, which, of course, my pop felt was junk. However, he did one thing. He took me to see the first, when it first came out, Destination Moon. Why? Because it was written by Robert Heinlein. He'd heard somewhere that Robert Heinlein was famous.
Oh, the Heinlein? Of Starship Troopers Heinlein?
Yep, that's him. And so, of course, when I got to the library, I started looking up books by Robert Heinlein. I started reading them. So
Very good writer. Very good author.
Yeah. Classic. Absolutely classic. So I got into science fiction and reading, recognizing artist styles through comic books. Much as my parents thought those things were low class. They burned my comics whenever they caught them. I'm just thinking of some of the comic books I had back then, including, there was one that was the first public appearance of what later became the X-Men.
Wow.
No, the Fantastic Four. It was the first appearance of the Fantastic Four. It was in it was an experimental comic. It was drawn mostly by Steve Ditko. As I say, I recognized his style. And, of course, the parents burned that, too. Do you know what that comic would be worth today on the open market?
Probably thousands.
Tens of thousands. We could put a new roof on the house for what that comic would bring. But, no, my parents thought those were junk, and they threw them out or they burned them. Anyway.
So you were inspired by these comic books. What was your first foray into Filk? What was the first song that you either performed or wrote as a Filk song?
Well, I'd been writing my own folk songs by the time I got into college, and I didn't think of combining science fiction and folk music until, well, let me think. Well, actually, I started Kipling. I was putting Kipling, a friend used to be Kipling's, the comprehensive collection of Rudyard Kipling's verse. And I loved it, and started putting some of his songs to music, his poems to music. And as I recall, the first one that my parents let me sing was his Christmas in India. And that persuaded them to let me keep on with my passion for folk music, which, of course, being folk music was low class. My mother was also a very good voice trainer, and she tried to teach me, besides trying to teach me to play piano instead of guitar, which was a hopeless cause. She also wanted to train me to become a lyric soprano.
Oh.
Even though my natural voice was contralto.
I was going to say, you don't sound like a lyric. I was actually pegged as a lyric myself. I'm a mezzo.
My mom wanted me to become a lyric soprano and sing grand opera at the Met, so she did her best to stretch my range. She refused to believe that I was a natural contralto, so she insisted on stretching my range. And to this day, I've got two parts of my breathing apparatus where I focus the air of my voice when I'm singing in the contralto range and the soprano range. I can feel it. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Yeah, I know. I haven't been practicing lately. My upper range is really raw.
You don't use it, you lose it.
Yeah. It's really all muscles, including the muscles in your uvula, if you please, and your muscles in your soft palate. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I say when I don't practice my upper range, I fall back to my natural contralto. But she did give me enough exercise that she did stretch me into having a higher range. So on a good day, I've got a 3.5 octave range, and I can thank my mom for that.
So what was the first Filk song that you wrote? We've established you wrote folk for a while. What was the first one that you wrote that was
Well, it was after I got into Star Trek. That was later in college. And, at those days I was running around with some of 1,000 close friends demanding an end of the war, and passed the civil rights law and things like that. And I didn't have much time for pursuing science fiction or TV. But I didn't catch it until they actually went into rerun. But it was on the day that the Vietnam War ended. All of us who had been fighting against the war were sitting around in Bet's house. Oh, I was a member by then of Vietnam Veterans Against the War. I worked with them as a psych counselor because I'd taken psych in college, and I turned out to have a knack for it. And so all of us were sitting around in Bet's house, watching the formalities, and Nixon saying the words. And we realized that at last the war was over. We all gave a great sigh of exhausted relief. All that effort, finally.
Mm-hmm.
And while the other vets sat around going into, okay, what should we do now that the war is over? Well, there's plenty of veterans that are still going to need help. We've got to agitate for improvements in the VA, yada, yada. So while they discussed that, I went wandering out to the student lounge on campus. I was no longer a full-time student, but I was still welcome there because I sang folk songs. Anyway, and everybody was sitting around the TV watching this show that I'd heard about but never seen called Star Trek. And I walked in just as it was starting. And, I'm trying to remember the title of that episode. It was the one about, That Which Survives, about the hologram guardian the hologram guardian of a planet that's long since been depopulated, and the weird way she had of appearing and disappearing. All the people died of a plague, and all that was left was the programmed hologram of the last surviving guardian, who was this beautiful woman. Now think, that was the first Star Trek episode I ever saw. Mind-blowing. All right, I'm going to come back for more. So I came back for more. As I say, it was in reruns, and I came back for more and more and more. And, of course, fell in love with Spock, who doesn't? And realized that one of Kipling's poems, The Thousandth Man, would do fine as a musical description of him, especially since I was practicing the D-modal tuning at the time. And so that's the first Filk song I ever wrote, and the words weren't mine. But the other Star Trek fans whom I ran into more and more hanging out at the student union. That's when I first ran into Trekkies, too. How many of them there were? Well, after that, I just wrote a song I had to write a song for Kirk. And, of course, for Bones and Scotty, and eventually the whole crew. That's another story. Anyhow, so I had songs for every character. Those were my first folk songs.
Now, how did Band from Argo come into being?
Okay. A friend was also a Trekkie. Wanted to make an album of folk. By now I'd started going to science fiction conventions, particularly Star Trek conventions. And Filk was that the songs I had for the crew were welcome there. And this one fan wanted me to put them all together on an album, which he would record. Oh, wow, I thought, let's do it. So I got together the band that I put together, which was, a couple of friends. We're not only Trekkies, but fellow radicals, and we eventually became members of the IWW Union House Band, but that's another story. And we went over to this guy's house and started recording the songs. He had a nice tape deck, the whole 9 yards, and a contract with a record pressing company. And we put together what was later become the album Folk Songs for Folks Who Ain't Even Been Yet. Vinyl. I believe there was something like 500 pressed. I don't know how many of them still survive, but they command ridiculous prices. when they do. And I don't even have a copy of that original myself anymore. I moved many times. But we were putting together, trying to arrange the songs on different sides of the album. Remember, vinyl has two sides, and they got to be equal length.
Right.
And he found that no matter how we arranged them for tune, for key, for theme, we were still about 11 minutes short. Somehow we had to come up with 11 minutes. So the gang asked me, Les, can you write a song enough to fill that 11-minute gap? And I thought, well, I've written a song for every character in the crew. What's left? So, well, why not a song for all of them? All of them on shore leave. And so I sat down I sat down with a good amber beer and a pad and a pen. And after about an hour, I came up with Band Margo. I sort of the rest of the crew, they liked it, they loved it. They made a few suggestions here and there, smoothed it out, changed some lines, transposed some lines. And we got it smooth enough. We said, what the hell, let's go for it. And we practiced for maybe 1 hour together. And then we recorded it. That was the same album that had the first recording ever of Hope Irie, which is the song I want to be remembered for. There's this whole story in how I wrote that. But anyway, Hope Irie was on one side. Band from Argo was on the other. And as much as Hope Irie's become famous and popular, so has Band from Argo. It was just a throwaway, damn it all.
And it's the one that everybody knows.
Yeah.
And it was the inspiration for a parody that we did on Starbase 118's. Band from Mentor. In fact, I was the lead female singer on that song.
All right.
Because it was my introduction to Filk. I'd never heard of Filk before. And I went, really? This is so cool! And I listened to Band from Argo, and I fell in love.
Oh, my God, it's catchy.
That Band from Argo was, as you said, a throwaway song, and it's the one that everybody knows.
Well, I hope everybody knows Hope Irie, too. That's the one I want to be remembered for. Grumble, grumble.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to me. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our listeners before we hang up for the night?
Well, but I've just discovered on YouTube a whole clutch of, if you please, fan-made Star Trek movies.
Yes.
I'm giggling over this because, back when I first got involved, fans who wanted to see more of Star Trek and couldn't get it out of the studios, they considered they satisfied their lusts by writing stories and drawing pictures and publishing fanzines at their own time and their own dime.
Right.
Later on, they got into publishing double cassette tape decks became popular. Then they started making their own tapes, their own audio tapes. Then later, when cassette film videotapes came out, then they started making their own videos, but it was pretty crude stuff. And now that you got CGI is available to just about everybody, now they're making their own movies. And I've really had a good laugh over the Marvelous Case of Axanar. Have you heard that one?
I have not. I actually have not seen any of the fan-made movies yet.
Oh, you should. As a general rule, they have good scripts, bad acting, and production values. They're all over the map.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So I do need to close this out. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I just have one quick question for you.
What you're saying? Speaking of Band from Argo, I finally wrote the novelization of the song.
You did?
Yes. So the novelization of Band from Argo is now available on Archive of Our Own, which is a fan-published archive.
I'm very familiar with that site.
Well, the novelization of Vance Margot is there right now.
Well,
Enjoy.
I will have to check it out. I will have to check it out.
Okay.
Thank you so much.